It's not very often I discuss the punctuation of a movie title, but you have to respect the fact that Darren Aronofsky made it Mother, and not just Mother. Or Mother? I mean, the exclamation mark is a very risky choice. You don't want to remind audiences of a 6-year-old storytelling style, or a presidential tweet. No. The real reason it's Mother and not just Mother is because for most of this film, Darren Aronofsky is not exactly subtle. And I have to warn you, I won't exactly be subtle with this review either, so there will be spoilers. But from what I've seen of the box office reports, I don't really think that's going to be a problem for most people. Let's go back to that first key word, subtle. Now, Darren Aronofsky has never been a subtle director, but the fact is he's always been a love him or hate him kind of storyteller. And even within a film, you can love him and then hate him. I'll address what I didn't like about the film first. Number one, the bizarre seesaw pace of the story. The first act is very tough to get through. It's very dry, and there's not much going on that tells you what this story is really about. However, that's just the calm before the storm. Number two, the constant extreme close-ups of Jennifer Lawrence's face. Now, I understand she's the title character. She's the main character, and we're supposed to relate to her. And I also understand that Aronofsky was probably going for a very claustrophobic feel, but eventually it just really wore you down. It was less effective and more nauseating. As for the rest of the film, I would actually say, surprisingly, it's pretty damn effective. Now that verdict is made with some long thought after the film. It was only after watching the film, processing the film, talking about the film, and then finally writing the review that I realized how well it did with its intended job. However, when watching the rest of the film, it's not uncommon to think, what the f*** am I watching? Because let me tell you, it's a ride. Okay, so what are you watching? Well, a lot of people seeing the trailer thought it would be a horror film, maybe specifically in the vein of Rosemary's Baby, and they're not completely off, but here's where the spoilers start rolling. It's actually the biblical story. The title of Mother actually relates to two specific archetypal mothers, the Virgin Mary and Mother Earth. And if you think to yourself, wow, a biblical allegory, that sounds archaic and boring, think about this. Giving Mother Earth a voice in today's age, in the age of climate change denial, that's a very interesting topic. And seeing how Jennifer Lawrence reacts to things around her is the best part of the film because it's not illogical. You actually feel pretty much everything she's feeling. And of course, the trailer sets up the premise of she and partner Javier Bardem who are surprised by two bizarre strangers who just kind of won't leave their house. Well, if you haven't figured out the continuation of the allegory yet, those visitors, played by Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer, are Adam and Eve, and Javier Bardem's character is God. And it's all there. Adam's rib, they touch the forbidden fruit, they're kicked out of paradise. It's kind of an interesting story. But to go back to what I asked earlier, if you think this is just a boring retelling, then just remember, this is the guy who made Noah with giant four-armed rock angels. Another thing I found interesting about this film is how the modern characters represented these ancient archetypes. How Eve is actually a bitch. She takes Jennifer Lawrence's hospitality for granted. She's rude, she's sinful, and ungrateful. The God character as well is very interesting. He's purposefully frustrating. Near the first act, he's too forgiving and too nice, but throughout the film he takes on more of an antagonistic role. He becomes wrathful, bipolar, and near the conclusion of the film, he's basically a codependent narcissist. But God knows, nice pun, that there are plenty of juicy little nuggets within the Christianity mythos. And I find it just makes for a very interesting story where you can pick out biblical Easter eggs. I thought I'd never say that on Real School, but here we are. There's a Cain and Abel story. They even leave the stain of humanity on the household. There's a mini flood when there's too many unwanted guests and they flee. There are locusts, there are frogs, and there's even a twisted version of the nativity story. I will say that as much as I enjoyed the detailed allegory of this story, I can see that after watching this film how some people just didn't like it or even laughed at it because there's so much madness around Jennifer Lawrence that it's just an absurd situation. And her reactions should mirror kind of what you're feeling too. It's just absurd. And I won't insult the people who just didn't see the allegory and tell you you just didn't get it. However, that has to be part of the reason that a lot of people didn't like it. I say that's part of the reason people didn't like it, because the approach Aronofsky took to this film, yeah, it's not for everyone. When I mentioned the bizarre seesaw pace of the film, that has a lot to do with the third act, because it is the most jarring and intense 20 minutes of film I've ever experienced. There's war, looting, raves, sex slavery, ritual killings. Hey, Kristen Wiig! Terrorism, cannibalism. I mean, you are just literally bombarded with these chaotic and almost hellish images. But here's the thing, it may be a bad filmmaking choice because the jarring nature of it isn't for everyone. You're gonna lose audience members. But that jarring effect may actually be the point. I want to be clear that my next little bit of commentary is not meant to insult Christianity or anyone who believes in that faith. In fact, as a sarcastic, jaded agnostic, once in a while I wish I had more faith. But the point is, I think I know what Aronofsky was going for. Because have you read the Bible? That thing is insane. And Aronofsky's mother shows this. It's grotesque, it's violent, it's in your face and absurd, as I mentioned before. But let's not forget that the Bible is also supposed to be a touching story. It's really a story about the human condition. Just not in the Virgin Mary story, because there was no touching there. At the ripped out, burnt up heart of it all, Mother is a story about our relationship with God and how we see Him or her. It's about our relationship with Earth and how we treat her or him. And more importantly, it's about how we treat one another. I understand that it's a very intense, obtuse film that isn't for everyone, but I think everybody can learn at least one little thing from it. And this may be the biggest surprise in the history of Real School, but Mother is an earn it. Poll question, what is the most obscure film you've ever seen? As always, leave your answers in the comments section below. But until next time, school's out. Hey Real students, thanks for watching. If you want to subscribe to Real School, click that round Real School logo right beside me. Also click that damn notification bell so you're aware of all of Real School's new content. You can follow me on Twitter, and of course, if you get anything out of Real School, you can always give a little back. Just click the link in the description below or the button down there, and you can become part of my Patreon team.